Okay, so for today's deep dive, we're taking a look at this fascinating YouTube conversation. It features Kevin Flynn.
A former federal homicide prosecutor.
Yeah, here in D.C. And, he also wrote this crime novel, Rock Creek, set back in the 1950s, all about the city.
Oh, interesting.
So we're going to kind of pick apart the most, I guess, the most interesting parts of the discussion and really look at, crime and policing and how things were divided in D.C. back then. And you know what? Come to think of it, kind of how those divisions are still around today, in a way, and how all that stuff shaped his book.
I'm curious to see how that plays out, especially in a city like DC.
Right.
So where's this conversation from?
So it's actually an interview on Glenn Kirshner's YouTube channel.
Oh, another former federal prosecutor.
Yeah, exactly. So they're talking about Flynn's 35-year career, all about prosecuting these like violent crimes in D.C., and it's like a real insider's look.
So we get to see how his experiences, actually inform the creation of Rock Creek.
Exactly. It's like this awesome blend of real life and fiction.
That's always so interesting to see,
I know. So I think what we should really try to do is like not just summarize their chat, but really dive deep into what makes prosecuting crime in D.C. different from other places.
Yeah, what's so unique about it?
And what is it like to work those homicide cases day after day? And then, like, how did Flynn even take all of that and turn it into the story of Rock Creek?
I mean, those are pretty heavy questions.
I know, but think of it this way. It's like our deep dive is your shortcut to understanding this complex stuff. And you get a peek behind the curtain of, like, crime writing.
I like that, a shortcut. Okay, so where do we even begin?
Well, one thing that really stood out to me was how Flynn described the role of a federal prosecutor in D.C. It's not like your typical, federal prosecutor gig.
How so?
Well, he explained that in D.C., it's different from other U.S. attorneys' offices. Those are the offices that handle federal crimes.
Right.
But in D.C., prosecutors, they handle both federal and local crimes, like the street crimes.
Oh, wow. So you have these attorneys dealing with federal drug trafficking one day, and then, like, a neighborhood homicide the next.
Yeah, exactly. And that means someone like Flynn, during his career, he wasn't just stuck in the office dealing with white-collar crime.
Right.
He was in court all the time for violent crime cases. He even called it a vibrant prosecutorial practice, which I thought was an interesting way to put it.
Vibrant. I wonder what made it feel that way for him. Just the sheer volume of cases, maybe?
I think it was more than just that. Think about it. Handling both federal and local jurisdictions.
That's a lot of different laws to keep straight.
Yeah, and different investigative agencies, different types of people too.
Yeah.
Different everything. So he was constantly dealing with this huge range of crimes and working within a super complex system.
That sounds incredibly intense, but also, yeah, I guess vibrant fits.
Totally. So then Kirshner, he asked Flynn about like the emotional toll of this work.
Yeah, it can't be easy.
No, definitely not. So he asked him about like the best and worst parts of being a homicide prosecutor. And Flynn's favorite part, it was all about achieving justice, for victims and their families.
That makes sense. Bringing some sense of closure.
Yeah, and he even talked about these really heartwarming and inspiring experiences that he had with the survivors.
It really highlights how deeply personal this work is.
It does. Like, it's not just some legal procedure. It's about supporting families during, like, the worst possible time.
You're stepping into their lives at a moment of unimaginable grief.
Exactly. And Flynn seemed to find a lot of meaning in that. But then Kirshner asked him about the hardest part of the job. And Flynn, he kind of hesitated.
I bet. That's got to be a tough question.
It is. He talked about like the constant back and forth, the exhilaration, and then the frustration that comes with the job.
I can imagine that.
But then Kirshner, he brings up something really heavy.
What's that?
The issue of dead witnesses.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a whole other level of complexity and danger.
It is. Kirshner, he kind of talked about how, tragically, sometimes witnesses end up paying the ultimate price for coming forward.
Because they spoke up.
Yeah. And he even mentioned two specific cases, one from 2001 and another from 2021.
Where witnesses were killed?
Yes. And neither case has been solved. And you could just hear in his voice the weight of that, the grief, the responsibility. It really stuck with me.
Of course, yeah. It makes you think about the immense courage it takes for people to cooperate in these investigations.
And the risks they're taking.
Absolutely. And how those risks sometimes have devastating consequences.
It's a stark reminder that the pursuit of justice isn't always neat and tidy.
It's messy, and it can be incredibly dangerous.
Definitely. So let's shift gears a bit and talk about what inspired Flynn to write Rock Creek.
Okay.
It seems like the 2001 disappearance of that Washington intern, Chandra Levy, was a big factor.
Oh, right. The case that just gripped the nation?
Yeah, and they found her body in Rock Creek Park the next year. Flynn actually worked on that case until he took family leave in 2006.
Wow, so he was right in the thick of it.
He was. But obviously, he couldn't just write a true crime book about it at the time, you know?
No, too many sensitivities. And the case was still very much active.
Exactly. And I think he also didn't want to, exploit a real-life tragedy for profit.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's where the idea to fictionalize the story came from.
But he still wanted to explore those themes, the crime, the investigation.
Right. And that's why he decided to set the book back in 1952, almost 50 years earlier.
So he could create some distance from the Levy case.
But still examine those timeless issues. It's like he's using history as a lens.
A lens to look at crime and justice, but through a different era.
Exactly. And what's also interesting is that the 1950s had a personal connection for him.
Oh.
Yeah, but his parents actually met in D.C. back then.
Wow. So he had this built-in sense of the time and place.
Right. That personal familiarity probably brought a lot of richness to the story.
It's like his own family history is woven into the fabric of the book.
Absolutely. So when we look at Rock Creek through this 1950s lens, what are some of the major themes that Flynn's exploring?
Two that really stand out are, first, the idea of boundaries and divisions within society.
Especially in a city like D.C.
Right, with its history and its power dynamics. And then, very closely tied to that, the issue of race, particularly within law enforcement.
The 1950s were peak segregation era.
Absolutely. And Flynn uses that historical context to really dig into those deep-seated racial inequalities. And it's not just abstract. He grounds it in the physical space of the city.
You mean with Rock Creek Park?
Exactly. The park itself becomes the symbol of division.
I'm really curious about that.
Well, Flynn talks about how he'd heard stories from police officers who worked in the 1950s.
What kind of stories?
Stories about how Black people were regularly ticketed just for being on the white side of Rock Creek Park.
Wow, just for being in a certain part of the park.
Yeah, because of their race.
That's just, unbelievable.
It is. It really highlights how deeply ingrained segregation was back then.
And how the law was used to reinforce those divisions.
Even in a public space that's supposed to be for everyone.
So Rock Creek Park becomes this, microcosm of the larger societal problems.
Exactly. And Flynn's point is that these themes, they still resonate today. We've made progress, obviously. But those old divisions haven't completely vanished.
Yeah, it makes you think about the ways that history still shapes our present.
And how those historical fault lines might still be influencing our lives in subtle ways.
So, in a way, Flynn's novel is like this bridge between the past and the present.
A way to understand how we got here.
Definitely. Okay, so now I want to talk about the characters who inhabit this world. We've got Detective Shane Kenck. He's a homicide detective with the MPD. He sounds like a real veteran.
Oh, yeah. He's described as this, grizzled, seen-it-all kind of guy.
World-weary.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that Flynn actually came up with the character of Kenck years before he even started writing the book.
Really?
Yeah, and he's loosely based on this retired homicide detective that Flynn knew.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and apparently this detective was known for being super smart and having these connections all over D.C., from the politicians to the regular folks.
So Kenck is like this composite character drawing on real-life inspiration.
Exactly. And he's definitely portrayed as a complex character. He's a war veteran, he's carrying the weight of his experiences, but he's also got this dry sense of humor.
Like a coping mechanism.
Yeah, exactly. Then we have U.S. Park Police Officer Bobby Shiflett,
who's Kenck's new partner.
Right, and he's like the complete opposite of Kenck. Young, inexperienced, kind of naive.
That classic pairing. The grizzled veteran and the rookie.
It works. And Flynn even shares a scene from the book where they first meet in Rock Creek Park.
Oh, after they find the skull?
Right, and Kenck just immediately starts grilling Shiflett about his lack of experience with, dead bodies.
It's like he's testing him.
Yeah, but in this kind of sarcastic, dark humor kind of way. And then Shiflett, bless his heart, he uses the word coronator instead of coroner.
He's so green.
It's a small detail, but it just highlights his inexperience and adds this moment of humor to an otherwise grim situation.
And what's funny is that Kenck actually finds himself smiling because of Shiflet's naivete.
It's like a brief moment of lightness in this world of darkness.
And a reminder that even the most hardened people can be surprised by moments of innocence.
Exactly.
And then the details of their assignment are interesting too. They're dealing with this skull. They don't know if it's human or animal. And it seems like Kent got stuck with this case because he had some issue with his superiors.
Oh, so there's some office politics at play.
Yeah, it adds another layer to this story.
And then there's the fact that Shiflet shows up on horseback, which Kenk finds kind of ironic.
Not exactly the image of a modern-day crime fighter.
Right. It emphasizes the contrast between Shiflet's idealism and the often gritty reality of their work.
And we also learned that the MPD and the U.S. Park Police have this, overlapping jurisdiction in the park.
Which could definitely lead to some conflict on the line.
For sure. So as they're starting their investigation, one of the big things that Kirshner and Flynn talked about was, the challenge of figuring out the cause of death, especially when you're only dealing with bones.
It's like a puzzle with missing pieces.
Totally. The medical examiner, or the coroner, as Kent corrects Shiflet, they have to piece together what happened based on very limited evidence.
It's amazing what they can figure out, though, from just skeletal remains.
It is. But Flynn explained that there are 5 possible rulings: homicide, suicide, natural causes, accident, and then undetermined.
Which basically means they can't say for sure.
Right. And that ruling is crucial because it determines the direction of the investigation.
If it's ruled a homicide, then the whole machinery of a murder investigation kicks in.
But if it's anything else, the case might just end there.
It's a pivotal moment in any crime story, and Flynn clearly understands the weight of that decision.
So, wrapping up this deep dive, we've really explored some fascinating territory. We've seen how unique it is to prosecute crime in D.C., where federal and local jurisdictions collide.
And we've delved into the profound impact of homicide work on the people who do it, especially the burden of dealing with dead witnesses.
And then, of course, there's Kevin Flynn's novel, Rock Creek, which takes inspiration from real-life events and explores these timeless themes of division, race, and justice against the backdrop of 1950s D.C.
With these compelling characters, the seasoned detective and the rookie,